don't we can start with what's all right, have you been following the price of Bitcoin at all?
I haven't.
So it just surpassed 10,000 today.
Wow.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, it's it's just like it's like mind-boggling. Um, how much it's gone up.
Right. So
And
with anything
this
that
all like
people,
started in like I don't even know when the huge like bump up was. Sometime this year, but like not very many months ago. Maybe July or
right?
August. I don't know exactly what happened. I'm guessing there was something nefarious that happened. You know what I mean? Like somebody
Yeah.
just like pumped in a bunch of money to like artificially make it go up, and then it just like
Right.
went crazy. You know?
Right. Well, I guess like a good starting point is like, what is Bitcoin? And it's just
Hmm. So have you heard of the white paper?
the white paper.
Yeah.
No.
So I'll send you this link. And this is basically what I've been trying to go through like step by step over the past few like weeks.
Right.
So this was like the original paper that defined Bitcoin. Um,
Right. I've heard of Satoshi Nakamoto, and that's not a real person. That's a pseudonym,
right, supposedly. Like
supposedly.
nobody knows anything about it basically. But
Right.
yeah. So this came out in like
2013, 2012.
no, this came out in like 2007, I think.
Oh, right.
2006 or 2007. Um,
So
2008.
this, yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, it basically explains everything. Um, and it makes sense, but I think one of the problems with it is that it gets to a point where it's so confusing and so complicated that and like I believe that it's secure, but it goes past like the ability for like an average human being to understand it. You know what I mean?
right.
And
And
at that point, it's just sort of like I think it's probably secure because the average human being can't understand it. You know what I mean? Or like it makes sense and it works, and the logic is makes sense because of that.
right.
Yeah.
And I guess a simple way, like in terms of the technology behind a blockchain, the way that works is basically you distribute what's called a ledger that keeps track of the transactions. So everyone has a copy of the transactions, and you know like where things went from one person to the other.
Yeah.
And basically, the reason that's secure is that in order for you to like be able to change something retroactively, like you know, past like like breaking the hashes and stuff,
Hmm.
even if that is that like you can easily go back and compare it to like the more people that have it, the more secure it is because that's how many like backup copies that you can go back and verify to.
Right.
So like
So
if one person tries to put in like something that's not true, like it's very easy to go back to like 10 or 15 people and check their ledgers.
right.
And if it's, if it's not the same, then you know where the error made.
Yeah.
So it's secure and that is distributed.
Yeah. But it's also the way that like so when there's a transaction on the network, do you know anything about like what happens when you like make a transaction in Bitcoin?
I think it's verified by like the person with the highest CPU power or something.
So this is where it gets crazy, and it's basically just well let's go through it because honestly it's hard for me to understand.
Do you have
But
the link?
yeah, I think I sent it to you on the Hangouts. I sent it to you. I'll give you the one.
Oh, okay.
Um, but basically, like the transactions go into like the abstract, and then people basically take those transactions and then they start working on them, and then there's only like it's not that it's like it's crazy because like every transaction takes between like 1 second to like 20 minutes when you
Right.
like there's not like a fixed amount of like there's not an easy way for all the transactions to happen because there's like so many transactions happening at once, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And but we'll go through it because I start not being able to be completely honest, I start not being able to understand it after a certain bit. So
Okay.
um okay. So so I think the best way to do this is just to go like break the paper down step by like per like individual block, and then
Right.
it I think that's the easiest way to do it, but to be honest it gets very very confusing, so we can see if that's actually the way to do it. um okay, so this first this first is just kind of defining what it is and the reasons why having a decentralized currency is cool. Um, and actually, if you want, we can just talk about that because I think that's like a very interesting topic about why having a decentralized currency is cool. Um, I think so. I think
That could be a whole like hours just by itself.
I know, but so like for us, we live in America, we live in a first world country, like we have no problem putting a lot of trust in our government. We trust like all of the big corporations. I have Google all over my phone. I have Google literally tracking me 24/7. I like
Yeah.
I like choose to do that because I like not because I trust them, just because I like value the coolness of that over my security and stuff like that. But you know, obviously, so decentralization, I think for us is more of a just a cool, like, fun thing. You know what I mean? But for like
Right.
other people, it's actually useful. Have you heard about the like stuff in Zimbabwe
Yeah. Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
of that? So like Zimbabwe, how like they use U.S. currency, but there's not enough. They don't import enough U.S. currency per month, so they're in
Right.
like economic turmoil.
And the reason that they were using U.S. currency was because like their currency got inflated to the point where it like
Valueless,
all international organizations didn't bother tracking. Like they
right?
went back and checked, and it was like quadrillions of dollars to the U.S. dollar,
Right, right.
which is just ridiculous.
Yeah. So I mean, like, obviously, in an like, if you are ever in a time or a place where you don't trust the people who are giving you money and you don't trust the stability of the like place that you're in, like that's why decentralization is like incredible, right? Because it's like a
Right.
in theory an easy way to like switch back and forth between something that doesn't track with a single economy that tracks with its own economy. And yeah, so I mean, like, if I lived in a third world country, I mean, what I hear is that people get their paychecks and they just immediately convert it to Bitcoin because it's more stable than whatever
Right.
the amount is that they have. But that said, and I think that the biggest problem with it is purely how difficult it is to understand. And I would never want to tie up my money or like tie up anything into something that I don't understand because that's how you get
Right.
taken advantage of, right?
Right.
And
Un-
sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, the difference between the difference between Bank of America and this is that if somebody steals my identity and buy something on my credit card, which has happened multiple times, you know what I mean? Like Bank of America can just say like, oh well, you're like we'll just erase that, and you're like,
Yeah.
here's that money back. Or if like Bank of America went bankrupt, the U.S. government would be like, oh here's however much you had in your bank account up to $500,000.
Right. Right.
And in this, it's just like if you lose it, you lose it. So you're fucked if you don't understand it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you're gonna be taken advantage of if you don't really understand it.
Right. And I think part of that comes from the fact that like where does I guess there's a larger question, where does value of currency come from? Like what
Right.
defines the value? And at least for governments, like you have this big entity that's like has like infrastructure and a military and blah 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 and
Mm-hmm.
companies that live in it that you can kind of say, oh, that's why this is worth this country is doing good. Versus with Bitcoin, you're like, at least and this is what I want to ask you because I know you've been doing more research. Like from where I understand it, it's a lot of it is like it has value because people think it has value.
Yeah.
And because like more people are using it, it's becoming more and more valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's like a good way of that's a good way of describing it. But essentially, like it is valueless, but it is like a proxy for value. You know what I mean?
Right, which is
So
what all modern currency is, because having a backup or collateral for currency is just nothing
yeah.
anymore.
And I was talking to you about this, how it's similar to like diamonds, right?
No.
Oh, I forgot who I was talking to about this. But like diamonds in our culture have a lot of value, but truly they have very little real world value besides maybe like a diamond knife or like a something in terms of like their hardness. But we don't really use
Right,
it that often.
right. And also, there, that's, I don't know if that's equates to Bitcoin, but they only have the value because of artificial scarcity.
Right.
There's a ton
Well,
of diamond in the world.
right. Yeah,
They have
there's
it in mines, and they just keep it down there because they're like, oh, well, we don't want people to know. And then you can make it really cheaply in labs.
yeah.
But they're like, oh no, 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 that
That's
not that.
lab made diamond.
It's like of
That's
higher quality. It's like less imperfections, and they're like, no, 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 no. It's kind of funny because they say, oh, if you find a stone with a lot of imperfections, it's not worth much. But then they say, no, the lab stuff has too little imperfections. It's also not worth much.
yeah, it's
It's like,
it's
wait,
insane.
what?
Yeah. And as somebody who bought a diamond, dude, it's such a crock. It's just like it's crazy. It's like such a crock, man. It's just like you walk into a store and you're like, "Oh my god." Like if I was this store, this is exactly who I would want to walk in my
Right.
store. You know what I mean? Like
You like know
this
nothing.
guy knows nothing and like
Yeah.
he's just going to, I mean, yeah. But yeah.
And that's pretty much the same for everyone. Everyone that goes to buy a diamond, like, I've never done this before. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I have to get one.
Right,
And
right.
they're like, all right.
Yo, for some reason your audio got really bad all of a sudden. Sounds like you're
Oh,
underwater.
what about now?
Uh, Speak again.
Hello?
Yeah, still bad. Let me try coming out and come back in.
I'll go. What about now?
Better.
Okay.
So, okay, yeah. So like, obviously it's interesting, and personally, the reason why I think that it's cool is because I just want to like not like I feel like like our generation is just like I don't want to deal with somebody. You know what I mean? Like I don't want
Yeah.
to deal with like I don't want to call. I just want to like I want like an online FAQ that like gives me my answer. I just want to like talk to a robot that like will do it for me. I don't want to like get into a taxi and like interface with the taxi driver. I just want to like the taxi driver to know where I'm going, and you know what I mean. And I feel
Right.
like that's what inherently like appeals to me about it. You know what I mean? It's like it's it's on that level of like um, you know
Yeah.
it resonates with me there.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to fucking go to like a different country and just not have to deal with shit. You know what I mean? I don't want to have
Right.
to. I want to, as soon as I get out, I want to go to like a coffee shop and be able, or a ramen store and just like buy something. You know what I mean? I think
Right.
that's like the cool part about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do think that Bitcoin is ahead, but I think that other currencies like the US dollar is catching up to that because banks are becoming more and more like electronic, like
True.
and like the fact that like a lot of my credit cards have no transaction fees abroad.
True.
So I can just like go somewhere and just like
Right. So you could make
buy
an
stuff.
you could truly make an argument. You could truly make an argument that all cryptocurrency is redundant in our cashless society. You could truly make that argument. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
However, clearly that's not the case.
yeah. Well, yeah.
Or
I mean,
people don't think it's the case.
right, right, right. I mean, I think to truly make that argument, you have to believe that not only is the U.S. dollar like, not only is the U.S. dollar like dominant and like allows for that because we are from the U.S. All of our money is in the U.S. and like we are able to do that. But like people from Venezuela can't get a credit card that does that. You
Right,
know what I mean?
right. That's
And you
true.
have to believe that it will continue to be that way. You know what I mean?
Right,
Um, and that'll only get better, not worse. You know?
right. So my question is because you're very right about that with the third world countries, and that's something I hadn't really thought about much, is that like do you think that Bitcoin is rising, its price is rising so much because
People in third world countries are putting money into it.
not no, because big companies and people in first world countries know that people in third world countries depend on
I think it's a purely speculative. Like, there's so much explosive growth in the past 3 months of Bitcoin that like the explosive growth has fed itself. And I think right now like Bitcoin truly, I personally think does not have any value. You know what I mean? And
it. Right.
like the value that we're seeing is the value that people will pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all it is, it's indicative of like the excitement for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think the price of Bitcoin is the price of the excitement for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or just, yeah.
But does that necessarily need to drop?
Right,
Maybe.
right. And yeah, that's, I think that it will, there's nothing that's going to make it less exciting. If anything, it will continue to be more exciting, right? So, I think in theory it will only go up. you
Yes.
know I think it's going to
And
have, like, there are going to be times, just because it's decentralized and because it's like like not controlled by any, that, like, there's no ability.
governing
Yeah, yeah, there's no ability for if the stock market crashes, they can shut down Wall Street, but it's not the same here. You know what I mean? They can't just shut it down. um
right.
so it will go I
Well, it would be very difficult. You could control like international conduits of the internet and national conduits and filter out Bitcoin traffic.
Yeah, yeah, you could. So yeah,
But
but
that's like,
it would require a lot of coordination by a lot of people, and it would require a lot of time. So not in the next 6 months. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not in the next. Yeah. Um. Um. Let's see. What were we talking about?
how we see it going in the future if it's
Oh,
going
yeah,
to
yeah,
die
yeah, yeah.
down.
So I truly think there's going to be not like a day. It's going to be like 1 hour where it goes down 50%, and then it'll go back up. But there's going to be like rapid fluctuations in it because people have gotten rich now, and you know they can they'll I think that there's like large, you know this is a decentralized currency, but there's like large corporations that are controlling mining and controlling everything, and they have large um, uh, standings or whatever, and they have the ability to make large movements in the market too. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I think that you say it's valueless. I think it has some value, and what the value of it lies in stability for people that don't have like a stable US dollar to get behind.
Which is so ironic because of what we just said, that it's
Right.
that it's truly an completely unstable, like all all of its behavior just relies on like game theory, and and basically like the greed of people in order for it to like maintain its value. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So
But I mean, the greed of people is a pretty
it's
stable
strong.
thing.
Yeah, that's true. People are always gonna be greedy. Yeah, but all right. So let's focus in on this white paper
Okay.
because I think it's a very it's very interesting. Um, I'll bring it up here. So basically, this introduction paragraph is is talking about how our current society works, how when you have a transaction, you have a third party that kind of verifies everything, that allows you to that allows you to um, like
That both
in,
parties accept as true.
right, exactly. And then they're just starting to describe a solution to double spending problem, which we could talk about, but is really just a decentralized, distributed
Right.
system. Okay, so this is where they break down like blockchain stuff and
Yeah.
talk a little bit about this here. So, and you probably know a little bit more about this than I do. I actually I didn't really do too much. Like I never I know as an engineer you guys do a lot of kind of programming and stuff like that, but I've never I remember I vaguely from Miss Steelman's class remember hash tables and hashing and stuff like that. But like I've never had to talk about like cryptographic hashes and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
um
Well, you can just think of it as like a password,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
just like something that's almost impossible to crack. Like it's mathematically just like,
right,
you
right,
know,
right. Okay, so let's see. Let me pull this up over here. Actually, I just lost you. So okay, why don't you read through the first paragraph in the second in two transactions?
okay. We define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Each owner transfers the coin to the next by digitally signing a hash of the previous transaction and the public key of the next owners and adding those to the end of the coin. A payee can verify the signatures to verify the chain of ownership. Okay.
So this diagram took me for. I mean, I understand the general idea about it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I understand, I think when you break down the abstract of it, like, okay, yeah, obviously you have you have like a list of signatures, and basically it just that just shows like who it belongs to, right? And then
Right.
the one at the end of it, that's who it currently belongs to. And then
Yes.
you can go back and somehow abstractly you can verify that everybody owned all of that, right? But you have
Right.
to like buy into the fact that you can do that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And honestly, I think that that's like a less important part of Bitcoin, just because
yeah,
cryptography is like really intense,
Yes, that's
and
true. That's true. And
it's
I think
it's
I
all like just like pure math.
right, yeah. I kind of went down into the rabbit hole a little bit to try to
Mhm.
understand it, and I think I honestly like got a little bit fatigued from it because it is just a little bit too too complicated for like a normal person. Um,
Right.
but but I think we can at least break down this diagram because
Yeah.
because I just took a long time doing it, so it's
No,
like
no, no. I think that what you had there right before two signs ago, one slide before that, before hash, I think that's like a really good
yeah,
way.
right. So it's points to where the current owner's address is. Easy
Right.
enough, right? And then
Right.
to look to think a little bit to break down, the hashes that they're using and all
Hmm.
that. And this is what I've come to understand with it. And feel free to correct me if there's
Yeah.
something that's wrong because this is not it's not yeah. But anyways, so when you have a hash, you have some input, and uh, what's really cool about hashes that I that or about that about this that I had slightly aware I was slightly aware of, but I wasn't completely aware of, is you can basically take any size input and then apply an algorithm to it, and I get a fixed size output. Um,
Yes.
and I was kind of aware of that with all the like MD5 stuff. When you download a file, you have those MD5 files, and then
Hmm.
you can like verify the files. And I was always
Right.
like I didn't really know what that was, but I kind of did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was actually reading about like MD5. So there's like a few different hashing algorithms. There's like the SHA-1, which is SHA-256, and then
Yeah.
there's like MD5. And we still use MD5 for like just like verifying files and stuff like that. But I didn't realize this, but like MD5 has basically been like figured
Broken.
out. Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
like broken. So you know what's the reason why it's broken is that it's not resistant to having different inputs giving the same output. So you can have two
Right.
inputs give the or two different inputs, and you'll get a different or yeah, you'll get the same
Yeah.
output. Yeah. So, anyways, you take your input, you apply an algorithm, and then you get some 256 characters or like some number of bits
And it's a
fixed.
unique output.
Yeah, unique. Right, right,
Which,
right. Well,
right.
relatively unique because
Yes.
what I said was you can really apply any size file to it. So in theory, you can only if it's a fixed size output, there's a fixed number of options that will output.
Right.
Yeah,
But if you have 256 characters, the
right.
like,
2 to the 256th or
yeah,
bits or
is
whatever.
enormous.
Right. So it's cryptographic because you can go forward, you can generate it very easily, but
Mhm.
you can't go backwards. And I think the classic example is you multiply two large prime numbers, and then it's really easy to multiply two numbers, but it's really hard to factor it into its prime roots. So
Right.
yeah,
And that's why if you can find an algorithm that tells you what I think, I don't know if that was proven to not exist, but that has all of the large prime numbers,
hmm
then you would basically destroy,
all of cryptography, I guess.
yes, and a
And
lot of the internet and be filthy rich.
right, yeah, yeah. Um, so, um, okay, so that's the idea of a hash, and
Yes.
then uh, I think one important thing is uh, to okay, so that's like a general hash, right? And then
Right.
there's this whole idea of signing and verifying, which
Right.
I didn't know. I mean, I know in theory, I know the abstract, but I really didn't know the kind of the granular stuff. And I was actually looking at some of the like signing APIs, which is kind of interesting.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, but yeah, I don't do you know anything about it? Because maybe you have a different viewpoint on this than I do.
No,
Okay, so
I just know the general stuff.
right,
But
right, right. So I mean, it's basically just signing it, right? Signing
yeah.
signature. Like you can sign it, and everybody could be like, "Oh yeah, like Russell signed that," but um, you won't necessarily be able to, like, somebody else couldn't go over and recreate your signature. I mean, it's a terrible example because somebody could very easily go over and recreate your signature, but
Right.
in this setting, um, you know, it's something that, only you can sign, but anybody can verify it, and
Right.
that's kind of the important thing and the beauty of this, right? Um, so the way that this works is also with the cryptographic hash, but basically, um, the way that there's some like common APIs for there's like a couple of different signing. There's like RSA is a common one.
Hmm.
DSS I think is another one. There's like a few different kinds, but they all have like the same general idea. Like you call this function and it produces two keys. It produces a signing key and it produces a verification key, like a private and public key, right?
Right.
So this like idea of like a private and public key is actually really important to understand, I think personally, because the way that Bitcoin wallets work is the exact same way. You have and actually, this is truly the underlying mechanism of why Bitcoin works, right? So the public key is what's on the network. That's what everybody sees,
Right.
and that's associated with your wallet. All your Bitcoin wallet is your private key.
Right.
So you have to keep the private key safe. It's some however many bits, um, you know, key or whatever. So um, so
And the reason that works is because of a hash, because
right,
they can verify your output, but it's really hard to find what your private key was that made that output.
right, and this is where it always this gets really confusing to me because going into the signature, creating the signature, there's a few different things that you need, and and for the verification, there are different things that you need. But I guess really to simplify things, these are the four things you need. You need a private key, you need a public key, you need a
Hmm.
message, and
Hmm.
then you need the signature, which is generated.
Right.
So essentially, what it is your I think your message, your private key and your message go into a hashing algorithm, and that hashing algorithm with using both of these generates um, the signature. So in the transaction, or every
No,
time, sorry, go ahead.
I thought the public key and the
So
hash makes the signature,
so it's
verifies the signature.
so that's verifying your signature, but generating the signature is different because each each time that you each time that any transaction happens, you have to sign and say, yeah,
That happened.
this happened. So this protects you as the payer, right? Because
Yes.
nobody can generate this besides you.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, basically it's the signing protects the payer and the verifying protects the payee. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when you sign it, um, and this is one of the reasons why I found this diagram so hard to understand, because you have the sign coming over here, you have the
Right.
public key coming in here, you have all this stuff coming in here, but truly the way that this works, the way that you generate a signature is you take a private key, a message,
Mhm.
and then you put those two into some sort of hashing algorithm and it generates a signature. So what you
Right.
end up having is a message and then a signature.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I don't think it. I don't think that this diagram accurately, or at least in a way that I can understand it, like portrays that. You know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
it kind of does. Like, what's going on? I tried to label this a little bit at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think like this whole thing is the message.
The message.
Yeah,
Yes.
or like maybe at this step, right? Because it goes into this hashing algorithm. But then they also have this public key here, which is confusing because I actually truly don't think that that's what goes into this hashing algorithm in order to generate the signature. I think this private key actually goes into this hashing algorithm, but it's okay. It's
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. That's really the only thing we have to worry about is knowing the difference between a private and a public key, right?
Right.
Um, and then
And
so
also,
sorry, go ahead.
the public key in Bitcoin is part of the message.
The public key, right? Your public key is available because that's that's basically uh,
Your
that's
wallet.
basically right. It's me saying right. Yeah, I said that the private key is the wallet, but the public key is the wallet. They're both the wallet, right?
The private key is just the lock to your wallet.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So now we have the message and we have the signature, right? So now me as a payer, I'm protected, right? Because nobody can generate that
Right.
besides me. Okay.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, there's a little bit of a black box as to why that is, but we have to just trust that that is the case.
There's a lot of math behind it,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's math that I don't understand
right,
fully.
yeah. I could probably work for the next 20 years and probably not understand it.
Yeah.
Um, so so then the next step is protecting the payee, right? So
Hmm.
because in theory, the payer could send a lot of different messages, right? Like
Right.
simultaneously, right?
Right.
Um, or somebody could kind of spoof the signature and
Hmm.
and say that or copy it or something like that. But anyways, the way that works is you take um, um, the public key, and I think that yeah, you take there in the like API for it. What goes into it is the public key, the message, and the signature, and it basically spits out a bool of like true or false. Um,
Right.
and so it's greatly simplified for us, but the process basically just turns into as long as you have someone's public key, you have the signature, and you have the message, you can say if that signature was truly generated by this public key from,
Right.
of this message.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but this took me like days to figure to understand. So
It's confusing.
yeah, it's can be a little bit confusing. Um, so why did I put this? Okay, this is just me kind of trying to understand about you know why this whole process is necessary, and
Right.
basically what we're doing is we're trusting in this process instead of trusting in like a third party, right?
Right.
So I mean we are putting our trust somewhere else, right? But
Yeah.
yeah. So then this whole paper is about this, the idea of double spending, because this idea of like the transactions moving from one to the next,
Right.
like it's obvious, like okay, yeah, of course, if you can verify that somebody paid you, and then you could just keep track of the payments, like you know of course that'll be fine, right?
Right.
But really the reason why Bitcoin is interesting is because of the way that they chose to solve this problem. Um, and this goes back to what you were saying, Tino, about the ledger. So
Yes.
what you have to do is be aware of all transactions, right? So
Right.
if somebody spends money that they don't have, you can basically say like, oh no, that's not right, and or whatever. um,
Right.
and and this idea of timestamps is kind of the next part of the paper, and is their way of um, solving this ledger, right? Because
Right.
in order to have, because in theory, you could have somebody, if I had 10 bitcoins and I gave it to you, I gave you 10 bitcoins, and then I gave Matt 10 bitcoins. Like, how do you solve? How do you say like, okay, well, obviously both of those transactions were not, like, one of those transactions isn't real. Which
But
one?
which one isn't
Right.
real?
And what they say is, um, um, basically the first transaction. Um,
Works.
yeah, the first transaction is the real one, and the second transaction is not. So
Correct.
yeah, it's important that you have a timestamp. Um,
Right.
and then so okay, yeah. So then they have this idea of you know you could do this by publicly posting the ledger somewhere and then just having the timestamp publicly available, but that kind of goes back on the idea that you're creating a decent, like this is a centralized entity, having a newspaper or a Usenet post or something like that that's publicly available. So then the next step is where they start talking about a distributed timestamp server.
Right.
And this is where it just starts getting crazy, man.
Right.
So so why don't we just read through this and then we can kind of like hash it out.
Okay.
But yeah. So a distributed time server. So rather than using newspaper, use that post, right? So I actually haven't read this, and maybe it would be useful to listen to read this, but
Right.
okay. So the way that they do this is crazy, but this is where this whole proof of work comes in. And have you heard anything about proof of work in Bitcoin?
I mean, I know that it works via proof of work,
Mm-hmm.
but whereas some other cryptocurrencies kind of forked and aren't doing it
Right.
and have failed, but
Yeah.
like Ethereum.
So yeah. Actually, to be honest, I don't even know how I haven't really even gone into
It
Ethereum.
started with proof of work.
Right.
Basically, proof of work means that that's why you can still mining is where proof of work comes from. But as soon as
Exactly.
proof of work goes away with Ethereum, like it, basically what they said was that there's no new things being made or discovered, or
Hmm. Gotcha.
it's weird.
Yeah. I'll have to read up on Ethereum because I know that it's different. I don't quite understand how it's different. But what's interesting in Bitcoin is that they basically combine a bunch of different things.
Right.
Their whole like idea of creating a decentralized timestamp server is in here.
Mm-hmm.
Their way to process transactions is in here, is in this proof of work, and their incentive to how to help people or how to make people use it is also in here. So like this is like really the crux of like obviously I said that this was the crux of it, but like this is the real crux of it, right?
Right.
This is truly the decentralized part. This is just like how transactions work. You know what I
Right.
mean? Um, so okay. So here, the proof of work involves scanning for a value that, when hashed, and this goes back to our hash. They use hash in so many different ways, which is also like a cool and interesting part about Bitcoin, but it also is frustrating because I truly don't understand hashing. Like I understand it on a very superficial level, but I don't, you know what I mean? So, um, okay, so
I think they use it too much, but I guess it's for people that really understand how it works.
right, exactly. I mean, this goes back to my logic of like it gets so complex the more you try to understand the like nitty gritty details about it, that like
Right.
that's why it's secure, is because I think that the number of people in the world that understand it are probably like less than 5,000. You know what I mean? Um, but anyways, it's neither here nor there. Okay, so basically what they do is the network generates a value, and then they hash it,
Mm-hmm.
and then what they're looking for is a hash of that value that starts with a certain number of zeros.
Right.
So obviously it'll be it's bits, so it's like whatever the fixed output is. If it's like a 256 thing
Right.
output, yeah.
Right.
So
So basically, that involves a lot of work because you're just throwing things
right.
at the algorithm
We have no
until.
way what we have no way of figuring out the next right. I mean cuz it's essentially, this hash, this cryptographic hash is essentially random. So
Right.
really the only way we have is just start checking the next number and then
Yes.
just see if you get lucky, right?
Yeah.
And then this is actually flexible. When they say the average work is exponential in the number of zero bits required and can be verified very easily, right? So
Right.
what they can do is, depending on how many people are mining at once, or how many full nodes are on the network kind of actively hashing, they can actually change this. And I don't quite understand who changes this or how this changes. I think it's somehow automatic, but like, you know, if there's only me on the network going, mining,
Mhm.
then I will probably only have to find one that has how the first bit is one, what one
Right.
zero. But if there's, a thousand people, they'll probably make it three zeros or something like that. So I don't quite understand, like I said, who chooses that, but I do know that that's flexible.
Doesn't it just continuously increment?
Um, well, it does not, because
Oh,
it is based on how many people are mining at once.
okay.
Yeah. Um, at least
Hmm.
that's my thought, because that's my understanding of it, because there's, as people like move away, like that's one of the reasons why like it will always be valuable to mine, because the less people that are mining, the more the easier it is to do the proof of work.
Right.
So that's another, that kind of goes back to their incentive to using Bitcoin. And you know basically
Right.
by having it flexible, there'll always be people that are like, oh well, if it's easier, then I should mine, you know what I mean?
Right. 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 Hmm.
um yeah. So let's see, for our timestamp network, we implement the proof of work by incrementing unknowns in the block until a value is found that gives the block's hash the required zero bits. And this is probably what you were saying about incrementing, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I was kind of just describing as the value that when hashed forms.
Hmm.
So this is what gets incremented. This is like that random value. Um, okay. Once the CPU effort has been expended to make it satisfy the proof of work, the block cannot be changed without redoing the work. Um,
So basically, as more and more people use it, and as they add to this, they add additional basically timestamps to the network.
mhm.
You need to do more and more work to add to that, which you need to do to make a transaction.
Right. So these TX, I think, are transactions.
Right.
And the way that it works is, um, basically all the transactions are out kind of, in this abstract area, and then a miner comes and takes a certain number of transactions and creates this block that
Mm-hmm.
has all the transactions. And I've heard it described as, if each of these are like lines in a ledger, a block is a page in the ledger.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and to be honest, this is where it also kind of gets a little bit confusing for me, because basically there's this. Let me see if they go into it here. Okay, yeah, they don't really go into it here. But in theory, you could imagine, Tinos, a scenario where there's two people mining, correct?
Right. Yes.
And you can imagine a scenario where at the same time, or within 30 seconds of each other, one person solves this
Mm-hmm.
and finds one value, and the
Right.
second person also solves it and finds another value. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, and then it goes on. So so this whole idea of the timestamp is not actually a timestamp, and this is another kind of difficult to understand, but it's more of it. It's more a timestamp. Let's see if they use the terminology here. So it's more referring to this, like CPU effort time. So
Right.
so rather than actual like the time of the transaction, or the time that the hash was found, what the blocks actually follow are how hard it was to solve this, and the way they
Right.
get is how many 0 bits was in the what was in the hash, right? So if two people solved at the same time, but one person solved it with more 0 bits, then that is like the one that happened first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind
That
of.
Yeah, that one is the one that everybody will pay attention to. And basically, when new people come onto the network, what they do is they download all of the blockchain, right, all the way to the very first transaction. But they only
Right.
download one. They download the longest one, and and what I mean by the longest one is the one that has the most work in it. So this is where they come over here. Let me see how they describe it actually. Proof of
The
work.
next one, 5, is a really good rundown.
Okay, let's just go through it then. Let me just run through this to make sure. The proof of work also solves the problem by determining representation of majority decision making. If it was based on one IP address, one vote, it could be subverted by anyone able to allocate many IPs. Proof of work is essentially one CPU, one vote.
Or rather, one flop,
Right.
one vote.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's measured in
One. Yeah.
flops
Right.
and CPU power.
Flop is a cycle. Is that interchangeable?
It's not a cycle. Cycles, different processors do a different amount of calculations per cycle,
I see. I see.
right? So flop is just like
A
how
way of
many,
measuring
yeah,
calculations. Yeah.
it's measuring how much stuff a CPU is doing. Because
Gotcha.
basically you can say, you know, if you have one CPU that does like 10 cycles a second and does 10 calculations
Yeah.
each cycle, that's 100 flops.
Right.
Whereas one can do like 100 per cycle and just do one cycle per second.
Yeah, you're right. That actually is much better terminology because that's a normalized thing, right? Because this
Yes.
is truly not the case. It's not one CPU, it's one flop. Yeah. Okay, so the majority of the decision is represented by the longest chain, which has the greatest proof of work invested in it. And sorry, I just like rambled on about that. I feel like that idea was hard for me to understand until I had to read more about it.
No, that was good.
Okay, majority of CPU is controlled by honest nodes. The honest chain will grow the fastest and outpace any competing chains, right? So this is the idea of competing chains. Like,
Right.
there's constantly going to be competing chains. There's constantly going to be other chains that have also solved this hash, and they're
Right.
like, oh wait, look at me, look at me. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Which is sort of an interesting thing, and but they have a few ways of figuring that out. But so to modify a pass block, which could be done, you know what I
Right.
mean? But basically, they would have to redo all of the work prior to it, and you can, they use some math I think later on that basically proves that it just doesn't, it's not feasible. You know what I mean? As long because it's they have a system for rewarding people of just doing with more CPUs to just process transaction blocks in an honest way. So basically, what they show is that it's not only is it not feasible for a attacker to use their to like catch up, but it actually just is more economically beneficial for that person to just contribute to the system.
Right.
Um, although that's
And
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
the reason, yeah, because like as the chain gets larger, and it actually the network one actually says it pretty well. We can discuss it after we read steps 1 through 6 on under network, but Um, Basically, it shows how like you know why or how you differentiate which is the like good chain to follow. You
Right.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because it's the longest, and redoing a chain just because you are hashing each time you go down a chain, and it's easy to verify, but it's harder to fake. Like having to go back all the way is just going to take a lot of power,
Right,
you
right,
know, a
right, right,
lot more power than it is to just keep going forwards.
right, right, right. And then this last part of part four, to compensate for increasing hardware speed
Yeah.
and varying interest in running nodes, the proof of work difficulty is determined by a moving average targeting an average number of blocks per hour. If they're generated too fast, the difficulty increases. And just FYI, Tinos, I
Mhm.
just learned this. Um, the number of blocks, or each block is generated on average of once per 10 minutes.
Okay.
So that's just something to be aware of. And also, in theory, also contributes to like the maximum and minimum times of your transactions going through. But um, okay, so okay, we'll talk about networks now. So new transactions are broadcast to all nodes. Each node collects new transactions into a block. Each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block. And and when they say nodes, they actually mean Bitcoin miners, right? So
Right.
so they haven't used the terminology here, but that's
Right.
kind of the terminology that everybody else is aware of, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, however, it's also confusing to us because, like, for example, I have a node. I have a
Yes.
node that gets all of these, but I don't think that I hash on it.
No, you do, but you just don't do proof of work
Yeah.
because you're not mining.
Right, right,
The
right. I'm
mining
just
comes
verifying.
the mining comes in step uh four, 3 and 4.
Right, yeah.
So
Um,
basically what you're doing with a node is that you're helping to
collect,
keep track of the transactions,
yeah, and
um,
verifying.
and verifying and also like, you know, checking like you're updating the chain as it's getting bigger and bigger.
Right,
And so then it's also easy to verify going back. And that's why it's hard for the attackers because they'll look back at your node, for example, even though you're not mining and you have a longer chain than they have, right? And
right,
they
yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, and if somebody can see my like a copy of a long chain on my node, then they can be like, oh, okay, I
right,
can easily verify that that's a long chain. That's the chain that I should be looking at. You know.
right.
Um, although I don't think my node does this. I don't think I collect the new transactions into a block because in order to be a block, if I'm collecting new transactions, putting into a block, then I would have to be mining.
No, because it's, I think putting things into a block is different than finding the proof of work for the block.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess my point is that you don't find the proof of work without creating a block. And in theory, different miners will be creating different blocks that have different transactions.
Uh, yeah, I guess so. I don't know how that
I
works.
know, I don't either. So
Maybe you're not doing things in the. I think you probably are.
because there's constantly like a flood of new transactions every second, and
Right.
and the miners are working on specific blocks, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
in theory, your transaction could go through in a couple of minutes, or it could take an hour or something like that. so
Right.
so this is where it also gets kind of confusing for me, but I don't know. Yeah, I I'm
Oh,
not
I
100
just
percent
had
sure.
kind of a realization or thought about how this whole thing works, but not technically, but like, anyways, we can finish this and then I can
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about it.
for sure, for sure. Okay, so sorry, I keep getting hung up on this. It's just like
No,
each line just has so much complexity to unpack, and like,
right.
yeah, I don't even know. Okay, So each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block. For its block, I feel like that implies that each block is different for each node, right?
Mm-hmm. Or can be.
Or could be, right. When a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes. So I guess broadcasting is different than collecting into a block. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Nodes accept the block only if all transactions are valid and not already spent. So I think, for example, that would be something that my node would be doing, right? I'm not mining, right, but I am accepting transactions and verifying, right? Yeah. Nodes express their acceptance of the block by working on creating the next block using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. Oh yeah. I forgot. Sorry, I forgot to tell you about this. But basically, one of the ways that they reduce the size is that they take the previous message and then they hash it. So so like whatever the long chain was, it's just a hash of it. For the next one. Yeah. Nodes always consider the longest chain to be the correct one and will keep working on extending it. Two nodes broadcast different versions of the next block simultaneously. Some nodes may receive one or the other first. So, yeah, this gets into what we were talking about, right? There's two nodes broadcast different versions of the next block simultaneously. Some nodes may receive one, because there's like 800,000 nodes, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, and the other one may receive the other one. In that case, they work on the first one they received, but save the other branch in case it becomes longer.
Right.
And by longer, they mean more work has been done on it.
Yes.
The tie will be broken when the next proof of work is found, and one branch becomes longer. Then they just discard the other one.
Right.
Yeah. New transaction broadcasts do not need to reach all nodes. As long as they reach many nodes, they will get into a block before long. Block broadcasts are also tolerant of dropped messages. If a node does not receive a block, it will request it when it receives the next block and realizes it missed one.
Yeah, because so what the node will do is it'll receive the next block, but then the hash will come out to something wrong because it didn't have the previous input of the previous block.
Right.
So then it'll say, "Oh, I missed the block."
And I think that this kind of gets into like an important thing to understand about it, right? When you are attached to the Bitcoin network, you're not attached to 860,000 nodes. It's the same way that BitTorrent works, right? If you have 1,000 seeders, you don't download from 1,000 people. You download from 7 people, right? And that's an important thing to realize here, because in theory, you just have to, like, if you want a transaction to go from one person to the next person, it doesn't need to reach a lot of people. It just needs to reach enough people that in that group of people, they'll create a block with it.
Right.
Which is hard for me to understand because honestly, I don't know how many. I guess there's just like literally thousands of transactions per block, because there has to be. I think there has to be, because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense that every 10 minutes a new block was created. You know what I mean?
Right.
So in that case, it does have to be more than 10 people, right? It has to be like a lot of people, because if it's truly processing thousands of, I don't know.
So one thing that I kind of realized here, and I guess maybe you knew this already, but it kind of clicked for me, was that, the reason that kind of part of what you're doing when you're mining, and the reason why it's rewarded with something that has like, a Bitcoin which has value, is because, the miners are what are doing, like, the job that like the bank or the treasury does, right? They're
Exactly.
keeping track and making sure that the whole system is running.
Yes.
And so they're getting compensated for keeping the system running. So it's more like the miners are like employees, right,
Yeah.
of this bank.
Yeah.
And when the more people that use it, the more it's worth,
Absolutely.
or
Absolutely.
but also,
So absolutely you're right. But we haven't even talked about payment of the employees yet. But
right.
but that is the next section, incentive. But yes, you're totally right. Um all right. So, how do we pay all these miners, right? I guess that's the next
Mhm.
part. By convention, the first transaction in a block is a special transaction that starts a new coin owned by the creator of the block. There's a lot to unpack here.
Mhm.
So the first transaction of a block, so that's just random, right?
Right.
It's a special transaction that
Mhm.
starts a new coin.
Right.
So
Whoever created that block.
this is the incentive. This is where the money is minted,
Mhm.
or this is where the banker or where the employee is getting paid.
Right.
Owned by the creator of the block, as in the miner.
Mhm.
Starts a new coin that is given to the miner, right? This adds an incentive for nodes to support the network, just like you were saying, Tinos, and provides a way to initially distribute coins into circulation, since there's no central authority to issue them.
Mhm.
The steady addition of a constant amount of new coins is analogous to gold miners. In our case, it is CPU time and electricity that is expended. Uh, okay. So it's interesting. They don't actually talk about this here. However, um, they so this is not forever. The amount, I don't know why they don't talk about this in this paper, but when they say starts a new coin, it's like, okay, great, one Bitcoin is added, right?
Right.
But over time, and I guess this is just in the how it's been implemented, in reality. But basically, the first block had a
Value.
value of 50 bitcoins,
Right.
and this 50 bitcoins for some reason is unable to be spent. I guess it's just for some reason that's how it worked or whatever. Um, the next block, and I think these numbers are correct. I'm not 100% sure. The next block was 25 bitcoins,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Um, so there's actually did we talk about this about this
No,
yet? Okay, but essentially, it goes like
it's a
this,
converging series. There's a maximum theoretical number of bitcoins.
right? And that maximum is 21 million bitcoins.
Okay.
So I think that's important, and it's an important thing to realize, because after a certain amount of time, this is no longer incentive, right? Because there's going to be no more, or it's going to be nominal to the point where it is literally meaningless to mine new bitcoins. Um, and I think that
Right.
this is an important. I think that this is what people kind of get excited for about in terms of speculation, right? Because if there's 21 million bitcoins and you own one of them, and if in theory Bitcoin were to take over as the universal currency, or something that, whatever, then in theory you could own 1/21 millionth of the entire, like, you know
Currency.
international currency, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, to one, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And I guess the way and each Bitcoin changes in value as people put in more work into it. It's kind of like weird
Yeah.
because the more you mine it, I guess the more, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
and what you can also imagine is a situation where the people that are mining are now worth so much money that they can put more money into mining,
Mining more.
right? Or they can put more money into the, I mean, like put more money into the effort to make it into a bigger deal. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yes.
Um. Okay. So we've gotten that right. That we've gotten mining. We've gotten the cap of 21 million.
Mhm.
This incentive. So this is the important thing that I haven't completely wrapped my head around yet. But this incentive can also be funded with transaction fees. Fees. I don't like fees. If the output value of a transaction is less than its input value, and this goes into so what they're getting into here is the way that Bitcoin transactions work is you have your private key which has some number of bitcoins. So
Right.
if I have 50 bitcoins and I send 20, so I'm Alice, you're Bob.
Mhm.
Basically, my transaction has to be 40 bitcoins to Bob,
Mhm.
10 bitcoins to Alice. So you have to
Okay.
basically do it that way in order for it to work.
Right.
What you could do is this though, and this is probably obvious, but I'll just write it out because I have it.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what you're doing here is you're saying, okay, one goes to the miner. It's like a little tip.
Right.
So I've I've been trying to figure out I've been trying to figure out exactly why I would ever do this. You know what I mean? Um, and I think.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I think because as you approach the limit of the number of Bitcoins,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then remember there's the incentive like, why wouldn't someone go back and change all the ledgers, right?
Yeah.
So as you approach, as it gets like harder and harder to mine a Bitcoin, then you might get to the point where like, you know, working to create a false chain might be more worth more just because, you know, the
Right.
amount for the next coin or for what's remaining might be more than the rest of the sum combined.
Yeah.
Or maybe the math proves that wrong. But that's why I think it says after a certain number of coins, it should transition to this, just because, like,
Definitely. Definitely. However, the way that Bitcoin transactions work now is that this fee, like you are supposed to put a small fee in, even while we're actively mining,
right.
which is
How many Bitcoins are in circulation now?
um, that's a good question. I can figure that out. Bitcoins 16.4 as of June 20th. So we're actually getting pretty close, which is kind of crazy. I mean, not that close, but like, right. I guess it goes up at a pretty. Let's see this all time. Ah, there's our little curve.
Yeah.
Not exactly, but not
No.
exactly what I drew. It's interesting. It's pretty
Close.
linear, huh? Almost linear.
Well,
Now it's maybe
yeah, it's tapering off.
sort of an interesting jump here. Probably was relating to I don't know. Well, anyways,
The other
um,
thing take it's always like, with stuff like this, because a lot of it is speculative and people don't understand, is you have to take into account like human emotions, and that's just like
yeah, yeah,
totally unpredictable.
right. So yes, there are 21 million. However, all of these things are able to change, which is another kind of interesting. It's you know sort of another. It puts a little bit of a cogwheel into this idea of decentralized, right? Because if it can be changed, then there is a central authority that's changing it. But yeah,
Right.
but it is
And that's
open
what I'm
source, so
curious.
in theory, like it's almost a decentralized, authority, right?
Yeah.
I know it's weird. It's weird. I'm not gonna lie. It's weird
Yeah.
because the rules can change, right? And actually, in here, they don't even mention this 21 million, right? So yeah. And actually, you've heard about these different forks, right? Bitcoin Cash and kind of all these other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are perfect examples of like they want different rules, so they fork into different chains.
Yes.
Yeah. So, um, okay. The incentive consist entirely of transaction fees and can be completely inflation free. The incentives may help encourage notes to stay honest. You have to choose between using it to defraud people by stealing back his payments or using it to generate new coins. You have to find a more profitable, play by the rules. Okay. So that's the basics of it. And to be honest, that's everything that I know about it. I haven't gone through all of these sections yet. But you can imagine these are important things to talk about, right? Because as the
Yeah.
chain gets longer and longer and longer, then in theory, it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And especially if it's like capturing all of the transactions for the entire world, right? Then we get
Right.
humongous, right? So, um, that's actually, I mean, there's no easy way to get around of it. Get around it. They can like optimize it, but it will always get bigger, which is something kind of interesting to think about.
Right.
And basically, what they're saying is like, oh, with just the rate of like RAM storage, even if it needs to be kept in memory, like it'll be fine, right? 4.2 megabytes per year is what they're. Oh, and this is where they put the blocks to generate every 10 minutes.
Right.
So, um, and yeah, that's that's a reasonable assumption, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's interesting to see like when this is or like how this is the whole like yeah, this is very important to note, but it's like the person that first started, that first block
yeah,
that can't do any transactions,
right.
that was worth 50. Like, did the creator just keep like half of everything? Just like,
Yeah, well, I think that's why it wasn't. You're not allowed to use those first 50 is because like it was like the creators and like I don't really quite understand it, and like I don't know anything about the actual implementation besides the fact that I've downloaded it and I have a copy of the blockchain. But this is what it looks like. I can show it to you if you want. Bitcoin Core
damn,
version of
loading
Bitcoin.
block index.
I think this is the blockchain. I mean, like this is if you go to
Yeah,
bitcoin.org or whatever, this is the thing that pops up. I haven't looked on like Git. I haven't looked on or GitHub or whatever, but um,
right.
yeah. So
It
okay,
it
well,
just sounds like the one thing I'm trying to like gather from all of this is that it sounds like in general, yeah, the more of a treasury. It's like a private treasury that they made and it's distributed. And, there's people that work for the treasury. Those are the miners, really. And they
yeah,
get paid in the currency. And their like incentive is kind of like or everyone's incentive is like, as soon as you start working, you get paid in this. And the more valuable it becomes, the more money you've made. And
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a great way of putting it.
but how
It
does that
it's like a
sustain?
yeah. I mean, I mean,
I guess.
there's enough people out there that
Right.
if that need a job, and there's apparently enough people out there that are savvy enough to be able to. I mean, I guess more savvy than you and me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
order to be able to, in order to be able to put all this stuff together to put, you know, mining rigs together to figure out how to actually become a full node that can mine, to figure out how to like optimize hashing. Um, it's interesting, but but another kind of interesting here. It just popped up. Actually, it just said verifying chains, which was interesting. But yeah, this is what it looks like. And check this out. This is how you so basically the node that I have right now, it's a node,
Hmm.
but so I have a wallet address and I
Hmm.
can send and receive.
Right.
And actually look down here, transaction fee. So this is the current transaction fee, I guess. Confirmation time target 60 minutes. Estimated to begin confirmation within 6 blocks. Request replaced by fee. Pay to. So this is like their public address.
Right. Right.
You can enter a label. I have 0 Bitcoin. I'm so rich.
Nice.
Receive. Yeah. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. So this recommended transaction fee. I don't know how this is calculated. Maybe I could just put a custom fee. I don't know. Oh, here, pay only the required fee of 0. The minimum fee is just fine as long as there is less transaction volume than space in the blocks. But be aware that this can end up in a never confirming transaction once there is more demand for Bitcoin transactions than the network can process.
Ah. Okay. 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 So basically, like you're you're basically auctioning to the people that are mining. You're saying include my transaction in the blocks and I'll give you this much for it.
Yes.
If you can say less, but then they're less likely to include you in their blocks. And each transaction takes up a certain amount of space, it takes a certain amount of work.
Right.
So it's an auction for
Right. And it's so funny because this is like yes, it's decentralized, but there is a central authority, and that's the auction, right? It's the miners.
right. But it's a distributed central authority.
Right, yeah. I mean, yes. It's just basically putting trust in different people.
It's an
Putting trust in
employee
random
it's an
people.
employee owned organization.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it, I guess. um yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's I, you know, I what I like about it is what we talked about before. I like that it's different from the state that you live in, such that
Right.
you know it can be it in theory is more stable, right? Because it at least depending on what state you are in. I guess that's the
Yeah.
reality of it. Like
Yeah.
Bitcoin makes sense if it's less volatile than how volatile the country's currency that you're using is.
Right.
And it makes no sense if if it's if you trust the government that you have and the currency that you
Right.
have. Which is sort of an interesting thing to think about. It makes me
But
want to
also
not invest in it or not put money into it or not buy it. You know what I mean?
right. But also like you can it's weird because with more volatile currencies also though there's also more opportunity, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And right, I mean, you could think that like, oh well, a nominal investment now could lead to a huge payback later. But I want to to get back to this idea that I don't think that this is an investment. I think it's like this is either like what it's gonna be or what it's not gonna be. You know, and it's probably much
Right.
more likely that this is what it's not gonna be. But it
I
is so interesting, and
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't think it'll be Bitcoin, but I think
there will be
people
a
will
version of
learn
it.
a lot from it.
Yeah,
Because honestly, I feel like if Bitcoin gets to the point where their currency is starting to rival that of like if the overall worth of Bitcoin, like 10,000 times whatever, 16 million,
yeah,
if that's gets approaching like the GDP of like a nation,
yeah. No, it's
like
already
in like
surpassed the GDP of a number of nations, actually.
right, I'm saying like a big nation,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, then I think it can start to be shut down because it's not immune to being shut down.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
true.
that's the thing.
That's a good point. To
And
be
I think
honest, I don't even.
I
I
think
can't
as soon
even.
as it gets shut down in one place, it'll just crash because it is like you said, a lot of it is speculation, right?
Yeah,
So let's say there's like a lot of miners in like I don't know Indonesia, right?
right.
Indonesian government says like, all right, I'm gonna I'm blocking this, so then no transactions can come in or out of Indonesia,
Right.
and no mining can happen. Then people get worried and it starts crashing, and then less people mine it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Um, and there was actually some. So, have you heard about like China and what's happened in China with it?
I think the government is mining it.
So the government, so the way that you purchase it is actually like I was showing you this website GDAX is one of them, but really I think the big one that I started off on is this place Coinbase. Um, so this is a Bitcoin exchange.
Mhm.
So they're essentially just banks, which is kind of funny, because you know this like whole idea of not having to or not having to deal with banks and stuff like that. But essentially, what they're called are exchanges, and
Mhm.
exchanges are places where you can interface with your bank, deposit money, and then have auction basically for bitcoins, right? It's like basically an eBay for bitcoins, and then they have their own fees associated with that. And then I
Right.
think once you have Bitcoin, then there's the fees are lower. You know what I mean? If you want to
Right.
like auction between
Transaction.
coins or like whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually really funny because I'm like seeing like the one like constant thing is that human nature is the same. So like
Yeah.
people are like, oh, there's this thing. I want to be a middleman.
Right.
I want a piece of that pie.
Right. Exactly.
And then it's
Exactly.
turning in, it's just like, okay, it's like there's another nation, right?
Yeah.
And exchanging within its currency is better because there's less fees, right? But then
Yeah, but there's more fees. I mean, like, there's like so many fees, right? It's like it's it's like mind-boggling, and I think people like truly, Tinos, the number of people that know what we know now about Bitcoin is okay. That don't own Bitcoin is less than less than a quarter of a percent, I'd say.
yes,
Like less
easily.
than 0.001%. I would say
Yeah.
that of the people that own Bitcoin, I honestly truly believe that only like maybe like 50% know as much as
No.
yeah. I mean
I'd
maybe
say
not even. I
much.
don't
I'd say like one.
yeah.
I think you're super.
I
Like
guess
you
so.
said, you heard like doctors in your hall talking about Bitcoin at
Yeah,
the
that's true.
hospital.
That's true.
They don't know. I'm
Yeah.
sure they're just like, oh yes, the
I'll
Bitcoins. It's a
buy
lot
it.
of value,
Yeah.
and I think that's why its value goes up because all these people just see it go up in value. They don't know what's going on, but they say, oh, I should get in on that.
Yeah. I know. And it's so hard, dude. Like talking about human nature, like I haven't bought any and I have been like stressed out every day because I was like, I should have bought some. Like I was thinking about buying it when it was 7,000. I was like going to, and then I like kind of got lazy, and then I wanted to make sure that I understood it before I bought it, and it just takes so long to understand it, and then all of a sudden it's like a month later, and it's worth, and it went up like, you know, like
All right. Do you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin, right? You can buy
no, you can buy
fractions.
any fraction, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
we should each get like half a Bitcoin.
Um, I initiated a small transfer. So that's the other thing, you know, these exchanges take forever. I initiated a transfer between this place and my bank, and it takes like 4 to 6 days, and I wasn't
How
aware
much
of
you
that
get?
either. I just put 500 right now. Um,
500 Bitcoins?
no, 500,
Just 500.
500 Venezuelan dollars.
Nice.
um,
It's like 3 pesos.
yeah, but I mean, dude, like, yeah, I mean, oh man, I'm like tired just talking about all this. This is like, it's just like
It's a lot.
it's so hard to understand. It's so hard
Yeah.
to
No,
understand.
I learned so much. I
Yeah.
learned a ton.
So we haven't even talked, dude. We haven't even talked about the tax implications of Bitcoin right now. I find this so interesting.
Tax implications. I think that there's honestly a lot of precedent for that.
Well, there is and there isn't. Let me send
So
you
here's
this.
my thought, not knowing, and I know you know more, but like my initial reaction is
Sure.
this: like as soon as governments start seeing that there's transactions happening in their inside and they're not getting a cut of it, they will either shut it down or force there to be a Bitcoin transaction fee.
Well,
And and
did
they'll need to get some.
did you see the message that I sent you?
No, let me take a show messages.
Or I can just pull it up on my screen too.
Okay.
So I have two things to say to that. First of all, to get back to China, China did a very interesting thing because during the explosion, like I think the majority of Bitcoin miners are actually in China.
Yeah.
Actually, so it's like a combination of Korea and China.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is sort of interesting. But and we can talk about this another time too. But it's basic. I mean, the complexity of that is totally different because that's based on the cost of power. So like where power is cheaper, it's more efficient to mine.
Right.
And then this and then the idea of have you heard of these things called ASICs?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that's an interesting thing that I've tried
Yeah.
to learn
I
about.
looked into that just because that was super interesting from the hardware.
Right, exactly. No, I think it's so cool. They're just things that are like good at running SHA
Yeah.
256 hashes, right? And
Which which is like funny because that's like the NSA is like the leading expert on that.
right, yeah. I actually was reading a little bit about that, about how the NSA maybe proved that SHA 256 has been figured out or something like that,
Yeah.
which is kind of scary.
Here's the thing is that I guess that's where you see where what you're backed up on is that if SHA 256
Yeah.
proves to have a vulnerability or a flaw,
But,
like Bitcoin is gonna tank.
yeah, that's true. I know. I mean, right. I mean, I don't even know what happened. Like, it's crazy because like the more and more I learn about about just like cryptographic hashing, the more I like realize that that's how like we keep anything on the internet secure, and it's
Yes,
scary to think about. But luckily, it seems so difficult that
it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
It's the
hard to
thing
wrap your
is,
head
it's
around.
like it's like so much easier to just like find the weak link in the human side that is just like not
Right.
even worth it. Just
Right.
send an email from like Google.org.
Yeah.
I
Goggle
forgot your password. You
goggle.com.
need to
Yeah.
change your password. It's just like,
Goggle.com/fake.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
That's a very good point. I didn't even think about that. But oh wait, sorry. Did I finish my thought about China? I didn't even finish my thought. I'm so scared. I'm sorry. I feel like I was trying to like explain this in a logical way, and this is just come out of like it's like when you take like a ketchup bottle that has like a spoon, and just like
Ouch. Ouch.
it's just like my thoughts are just like
Oh, I know what you mean. Oh, it hurts to laugh. Oh God.
But anyways, when I think when Bitcoin was at around a price of like 6,000, it had been in its explosive growth phase. China actually banned Bitcoin exchanges, and Bitcoin exchanges are currently banned in China. Oh no! I think that they maybe reopened them. I don't know. There was like something where they banned exchanges, and everyone was like, "Oh shit, what's gonna happen now?" Like, because that gets back to your idea of like, okay, well, what if one country shuts it down? Like, what if China shuts it down, right? Like, China is the place where they would be able to shut it down because they have such a the Great Firewall or whatever. Um, but do you know what happened? It just like kept going up. You know what I mean?
It dipped for a little.
Uh, it it's I don't know if that was around that time though. I actually don't think it was at that time. I mean, like, it's possible that it was here, but I'd have
China
to
bans
I'd have to.
Bitcoin exchanges.
Do you know what the date is? I have the thing open in front of me.
First week in September. So it did create a big drop.
First week in September, dude. This is the drop though.
First week in September,
September.
it went on the 3rd of September, it was uh,
Here, I'll go back like a couple months, 3 months before. So you said September 3rd, correct?
no, it just said first week in September.
Okay. Well, here's all of September. Or wait, are you
I
looking at my
can't
screen?
see.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Okay. Here is September.
Yeah, it went from there down to this peak down here.
Down here.
Yeah. And then I think they brought them back,
Yeah, I think that they
opened them.
they reopened them,
But it's
and
still a big drop. I mean, it's not as big as like the raise that's been going up now, but it's still like,
yeah. So
that's a pretty
if we go back,
significant drop.
let's do this. Let's put just September, right? So this
Yeah.
is the year basically before.
Yeah. So that drop right there that you just did,
Yeah.
that was like what, 6 to 4? That's like 20%, right?
46 to 37 in the span of 15 days.
So that's like 20%.
Yeah,
That's a pretty big drop.
that's true. But the
But it
rate that
also
it's,
wasn't
but I mean,
Bitcoin.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
That also wasn't Bitcoin banned. It was just exchanges banned.
Yeah,
And what I'm assuming they did is that they now like they tax the exchange.
probably. Or I mean, there's probably just some way that they've
Because
that
I
they
guess
charge
if
exchanges
you
more or something like that.
yeah, if you tax the like changing the currency enough, then you'll get that back.
Yeah. So you're right. When the big countries ban it, it will have an impact on the. It will have an impact.
Yeah.
Um.
And not just banning exchanges, like you can, especially China can just shut down, like nothing comes in or out. No
Yeah.
mining, no transactions, no nothing.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Which is actually why. So there are a couple of different virtual currencies that we can talk about. At some point, it's probably not the right night to talk about just because it's just
Yeah.
too complicated. But
Yeah. And it's
um,
getting late and I need to get something to eat.
oh yeah, no worries, dude, for sure. Um, this is the last thing that I want to talk about though.
Got
Just
it.
how the IRS treats Bitcoin. And I don't think that I would say that of the people who own Bitcoin, like even less people understand the tax implications of it. And I think it's important because people could go to jail if they don't understand this. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's treated as property, which kind of is a nice segue into our previous,
Ooh.
which is a nice segue into our previous conversation about about ownership of
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Um, where'd you go? I lost you.
that's okay.
There you go. It's treated as property. So state by state, it's going to be different.
Right.
And in theory, not only are is every single transaction public in Bitcoin, so the IRS
Yes.
has the ability to go back and see every single transaction. But in theory, you are supposed to report every single, even if it's like $1, you're supposed to report every transaction that you've bought and sold. You know what I mean? And it will have tax implications because it's like buying and selling a piece of real estate.
Oh, and I know real estate tax is just super complicated in and of itself.
I know, and I mean this is like the crazy thing, right? There's like 13-year-olds doing this, and I think that we are ahead of the IRS, to be quite honest, at this point. Where I don't think right now they're going back and looking at all the transactions and tracing them to individual bank accounts unless they're over a certain value.
Mhm.
However, the unfortunate problem with Bitcoin is that every single transaction that's ever been done is is everybody is
Is
aware
there.
of. Yeah, so
Right.
it'd be very easy for them in theory if they could understand that. I don't know how they would, but I mean, they just need somebody who understands it or whatever
I'm
to
sure they can pay someone to do it.
yeah to go back and then all of a sudden boom, every single person who didn't state every one of those transactions are committing tax
Tax evasion.
tax evasion. Yeah, so that's interesting too.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I wonder if like the FBI is just holding on to that to kind of Al Capone whoever they want.
yeah.
They're like, we don't need to get you for the crimes. We can just get you on Bitcoin tax evasion,
Yeah, right. Because nobody fucking can understand it.
right? And then the person's gonna be like, I did what? And they're
Yeah,
like,
you paid for a $10 piece of ice cream and you didn't mark it as like a real estate asset. You know what I mean? Just like what? It's crazy, man. But yeah, so that's why I truly think that Bitcoin kind of sucks. I mean, like this is all the reasons why Bitcoin sucks. Every reason that we talked about, like it's too complicated. It's hard to wrap your head around. It doesn't scale very well. Once you have more people, once you reach the market cap, this whole idea of no inflation, I think is a bad idea because then it's just every single transaction you just lose money. That's I mean
yeah,
they're basically just doing reverse inflation. You know what I mean? Which I don't think is very it doesn't seem to be. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. It's like on the one hand, it's like super cool. I want to get into. On the other hand, I like don't understand it enough to be confident. Like this isn't just the creator just like scamming everyone.
Oh
Just
my
has like
god, yeah.
billions.
I know, I know. I mean, truly, like, if somebody just told me all of this and was like, "What do you think?" I'd be like, "It's too complicated to work." You know what I mean? Like, this
Right.
is obviously too complicated. This
But
whole
but
system.
that was a key point. You said if someone told me all this, no one tells anyone all of this.
I know, I
No one
know,
knows how complicated it is. People are just like, it's just a currency.
I
You're
know.
like, oh, I exchange to euros all the time. I know exactly how this works.
Yeah. It's like it's a currency that's treated as real estate property. You know what I mean? In the U.S. eyes, and I mean, it's just so, it's, it makes no
And
sense to me.
everyone knows if you've ever exchanged any currency for it, people know what you've done from then on
Yeah, right,
because they know
100%.
your public key, right?
Yes,
That's your bank has a public key,
yeah,
I know.
Yes, exactly. Um, yeah.
And it's not just like the banks or the government knowing, it's literally anyone could find out,
Yes.
which is,
And
it's
I am
fine.
not 100% sure how to do it myself, but I do know that it's possible. It just will require a little bit more reading, but I do know that it is possible. Yeah. So I guess Tinos, the question is for us is that do we get in with the knowledge that this is going to fail, and then we get out early before everybody understands how complicated it is, while we're still in the explosive growth phase?
Hmm.
Do we not fuck around with it because it's a bad idea? But at the same time, it's like, I feel like, honestly, I feel pretty confident. The amount of weeks and months it's taken me to understand all of this, it's probably been like a month and a half, easily, of like active. I don't know. It just is a lot of reading, and it just is hard to
Right.
find the correct information about it. You know what I mean? So
Because
it's
most people don't know the correct information, so they.
right, yeah. They just think that they like, oh, well, I think this is how it works, and I do that too. But I'm saying like, well, you know, this is what I understand about it, and this is where I don't understand it at all. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I haven't gone through like the like I mean, even thinking this is just like the initial white paper. I haven't even thought about like the idea of going through the actual like code itself or like how the code
Yeah.
is implemented. You know what I mean?
My thought probably is that even getting in now probably will make money.
Yes. I mean, it will continue to go. I mean, it's been going up for what, 3 months? And, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to go up for another 3 months. I think there will be a day where we'll drop 50%, or an hour, I should say. But I
Yeah.
truly believe that it will continue to go up. And in theory, like, I am not a short term gain kind of person. I'm more of a long term person.
Hmm.
So, like, I really dislike the idea of doing this. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Hmm.
It is kind of interesting to think about like, oh, I could own 1/21 millionth of the of the global economy.
Bitcoin worth, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I should get a little bit.
And I don't know how these exchanges are going to like disseminate like if they're gonna give out um what's it, W2s or whatever.
Oh God, I'm gonna need to not. There's no way I'll be able to do my own taxes after this.
Yeah.
They'll be like, you bought $1,000 worth of property.
Yeah. It's like,
I'll be like, I guess so.
it's weird, man. Yeah. I don't know.
I like want to like pay my cousin in Greece to do it just because I know Greece doesn't isn't gonna do shit. They're just gonna be like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, I honestly that'd be a good way to do it. Um, yeah, but actually, it's not completely true that it's public record. Like, there is a way that you can be anonymous, right? I mean, like, you can imagine a situation where like I make a wallet, you give me $100, and then all of a sudden I give you your wallet, and then it's like, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can imagine a situation like that, but I think it's just very hard to do on Bitcoin because you have to interface through the exchanges typically.
right.
I mean, I could write you a check behind the closed doors, and then they would never know. But yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And
If I had a lot of money and I wanted to get in on this, it definitely wouldn't be through an exchange. It would definitely be through someone
who
that
has
I
a lot of
find that's a
Bitcoin?
miner that has a lot of Bitcoin,
Yeah,
and I just like,
a minor under the age of 18. Talk about NSA.
yeah, there's
um,
like a 14-year-old kid, and you're like, here's an Xbox.
there's actually a couple of hilarious YouTube videos about these like. There's like this one 16-year-old kid who like when he was 8 his grandma gave him $1,000 and he just bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and now he's worth like $500 million or something like that. It's
He's only worth half a billion if he sells.
yeah, I mean yeah, dude, it's there's some it's it has spawned some interesting shit for sure. Um, oh, there's one thing I wanted to talk to you about that I thought that was so funny. I can't remember. I'm like so tired. We just covered a lot of ground. I think
Yeah.
now you know more, if not more, than I do about
No, I think
about
we know about the same.
yeah.
Which, yeah, damn. No, I learned a ton. Now I'm just like, I know more, but I'm like more confused, kind of.
I know. The
I'm
more
like,
that you learn about it,
what's the...
the more confusing it gets. Truly, it's like
And it still it comes down to like, I guess it's all speculation because I can't see where like it's just
yeah,
the whole like if people think it's worth money, then it's
right. And if people don't understand it and it's going up in value, then
they think it's worth money.
yeah, they really think it's worth money. Yeah. And I feel like we just proved to ourselves how little money it's worth and how it's confusing and doesn't make sense and like, you know,
Right.
it's so funny. Um, but
Because at first, when I first heard about Bitcoin, I thought like, oh, are they like solving some things when they're mining that has use and people are like, it's like instead
absolutely.
of doing a supercomputer, you just use Bitcoin miners
Right, yeah.
and you can sell
Yeah, like there's
that
some
like
innate
CPU
value to
time.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. It's just like not at all. It's just like solving random hashes so that people know that you've solved random hashes so that
Right.
they know that you've done a lot of work and that you can trust what they've done, I guess.
Right.
Um,
And that they're keeping track of all the transactions.
yeah.
You can trust that they're keeping track of all the transactions.
Yeah. Yo, this is what I want to tell you though. I remember. So glad I remember this. So initially, yeah, you know like Silk Road.
Yeah.
So initially, all transactions were done on Silk Road were done through Bitcoin, and I actually think that Bitcoin is still by far the majority of weird online transactions are done through Bitcoin. However, one kind of interesting thing is that when Silk Road was shut down, and when like the FBI basically came in and found those guys, which I think that they were
Mm-hmm.
able to track them through the Bitcoin
That makes
payments
sense.
wallets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, they actually seized like 4 million Bitcoin. So the FBI actually like holds like 4 million Bitcoin or something like
That's
that.
like $40 billion.
Is it 4 million times four? How many zeros do we add? Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
yeah, more,
That's
right?
$40 billion. A little more.
Yeah. So that's another thing to like think about, you know? Like in theory, the government made themselves very like the government loves what's going on right
Bitcoin.
now. They're
Yeah.
probably one of the like largest holders of Bitcoin. You know what I mean?
Oh my God. I can totally see they say the IRS like, oh, you didn't pay your taxes? I'm gonna seize your Bitcoins. I'm gonna seize your property,
Yeah,
which is what happens when you don't pay tax on your property.
yeah. Actually, I'm not sure if it's 4 million, but I know
Okay.
that it
4 billion
struggles
is
to
a lot.
seize 600,000 bitcoins, seize the collection of 144,000 bitcoins, and this is just what's reported.
Right.
I'm sure that okay, like so. Look, 174,000 bitcoins, like that. That's another. That I mean, that just puts a whole nother like twist to it, right? Like, what if the U.S. government liked this? You know what I mean? What if the U.S. government was supporting this?
It might
because
be.
they have it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's sort of weird it's a weird concept to wrap your head around.
God, I'm just more confused now.
I
I
know.
learned a lot, but I'm more confused in a way.
I know. Crazy,
All right,
dude.
dude. I'm gonna get something to eat.
All right, sounds good,
Oh
man.
shit, I need to change laundry.